We're in our 6th season, so we celebrated our 5th anniversary 6 months ago. We're like 5.5 years in now.
So there you go. So Jim, tell us a little bit about what your podcast is and all that good stuff.
The name of the podcast is Monster Attack. And it's got, I don't know if it's a long, convoluted story or whatever, because it's quite a history behind it. It was not the first podcast I did. A guy named Jess Roberts and I were working for a radio station years ago, and as of the beginning of 2014, we both left that station. It was sort of a disaster as a station. And, so I was sort of floating in limbo. I've been doing radio on and off for more than 30 years in my lifetime. And he called me and said, let's do something on the internet. He got the bug. He got the broadcasting bug. Because he and I were doing high school football together. He was my color guy for football. He really got the bug behind the mic. And he's a big IT guy, designing websites and that sort of thing. So he says, I can make this work. I've got my own server and all that stuff. So we decided to do an internet radio station. Don't do that. We came up with 2 podcasts. One called Nerdvana. So we talk about all this nerdy stuff. We talk about Game of Thrones and Flash and Arrow, and movies, all the Marvel movies and DC stuff, and all that. And then we decided, hey, we talk about comic book movies, so let's do a comic book podcast. And I came up with the name for this. I do want to take credit for this. Biff and Zach Powell. So, he says, oh, that's clever. And I said, I know. Anyway, so we had that, and then he was a big deal, and I like playing video games, but he was a huge, almost a professional gamer type. So he and another friend of his who were big gamers, and a third guy that they found, did a gaming podcast called Respawn. So that was the core of our network, known as Project iRadio. He decided to get out of the business and turn the day-to-day duties over to a writer from Florida, a horror writer by the name of Armand Rosamia, and we became Project Entertainment Network, which we still are today. We have 25 podcasts going strong. So somewhere during this mix, around 2016, I got, this is before Jess decided to leave, I said, I want to do a monster movie podcast. This is something that has been a part of my life. Since I was a little kid, I was introduced to monster movies when I was 6 years old by my mom and dad. They were both big monster movie fans. And I want to talk about that experience. I think that would make an interesting podcast. We were monster kids. We were weirdos growing up. I mean, nerds were weirdos. I was pretty nerdy too as well. But the monster thing, I built all the monster models, the Aurora kits and stuff. I had every single one. At that time, and this will age me here, 99 cents for a monster model back then, which was still a pretty good clip, but then your paints and everything, and I think part of that may have affected my brain, just probably by the way I am today, just breathing in all that glue and paint and stuff like that. But I would spend a major portion of my week building whatever monster model I had not built. So this was a big thing. I wanted to talk about the movies that came into my world and opened up actually a love for film in general. I love basically all genres, except maybe romance. Maybe some of those are okay, but I'm not really into chick flicks. But Dad was into war films, so I got into those and the monster movies. But the monster movies really opened the door for me to get interested in how movies were made. So that all comes into the podcast a little bit. Another guy and I, Mark Max, who's one of my main co-hosts, is one of the leading monster artists in the world. We talk about book covers, DVD and Blu-ray covers, even lunch boxes, all kinds of things. He's one of the go-to guys for magazines and things like that if they need monster stuff. We're not critics. We don't pretend to be shady. We're not Siskel and Ebert of monster movies. We don't pretend to be experts, although I think I could put my knowledge of these movies up against most people. But I don't think of myself as an expert. There's much better people that have written books on the subject. We talk to them about these things. What the movies did to us, for us.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. And we have a really nice audience of people our age who grew up monster kids and generations after us that have been introduced to some of these movies and said, yeah, man, my dad went through that, but I'm going through that too. So, it's like reliving your childhood. It's a lot of fun.
And so tell us a little bit about having done this for almost 6 seasons now.
Almost 6 years now.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's got to be, you've had probably some ups and downs, but the thing I want everyone to know is that what you told me is you've never missed putting out an episode in that time.
I don't want to say that I regret doing this. I did this out of ignorance more than anything else. I said, we'll do this every week. This will be fun because we just love talking about this stuff. Anyway, when this guy and I get on the phone, we talk about for hours about different monster movies. Just naturally, when we first met, we didn't know each other. He'd done a painting of the Saucer Man from an old classic film called The Invasion of the Saucer Man. And I'd never seen anybody who'd done a rendition of them. And I'm walking, I was at Monster on the convention, year 1, here in Atlanta, and I walked around his table and saw him sitting up there, and I just dead stopped and said, I must have that. Well, he wasn't there, he was doing the piano, but his girlfriend was there, so I purchased it, and then he came back and I said, I need to have you sign this. And I was going on and on about the Saucer Man, and that led to other movies, and we probably went for 3 hours straight.
Wow.
Talking about monster movies, and that, after over 2 years of knowing each other, we were pretty good friends, that spawned Monster Attack. I said, let's just do it every week. We'll just Skype. He's in Tallahassee. At this point, I was in Northwest Georgia. We'll Skype it up, and talk for 40 minutes to an hour. But when Jess and I were doing Project Out Radio, we determined that doing like a full-fledged radio show on the internet was stupid. Because people don't listen to stuff that long. And then we decided to do podcasts, which I said, podcast, what's that? I don't know, really was ignorant about all of this. And then explained to me how podcasts work, and it still took me a while to figure it out. Well, we found out 40 minutes to maybe an hour, depending on the subject, is the best you could go. So I said, hey, Mark, you can tell an hour easy on this stuff once a week. A lot harder than you would think. I think it probably might have been better to go every 2 weeks, or whatever, while we're growing the audience. But I told him, I said, look, if we're going to commit to a week, we're going to get one every single week. So we decided to get a little bank going. We would do 2 in a week, and we publish one, so we build up a bank, just in case something might happen. And we launched in February of 2016. In April of 2016, I had a heart attack. And I was hospitalized and had to have triple bypass surgery. So now all of a sudden, I'm having the surgery and I'm going through 6 weeks of rehab. It turned out we had 8 episodes in the can, and it worked out beautifully. So that by the time I was coming out of rehabilitation and getting back on my feet, I think maybe I could have done a podcast a little earlier than that, but I really was getting my strength back and stuff. That kind of surgery, you learn how to walk again. It's brutal stuff. But it was, saved my life. It just timed itself. It was like, when I ran out of shows, it was like, okay, I feel like I can get back to it now. So we never missed. We came very close last week. I had to make a sudden move. My mom died, and I ended up selling my property and moving to Atlanta. This was all during a pandemic, so finding a place to live during a pandemic was a job within itself. I still never missed one. And I had to live for 3 days in a hotel, waiting for my apartment to be done. I'd already sold the house. The new people had already moved in, so I had to go somewhere. So I had all my stuff in storage. And we needed a show that week, and I remember calling him and said, Mark, I think I'm going to do something I promised I'd never do. I think we're going to miss a show. I don't know how. I'm living in a Motel 6, do this? And he said, do you have a laptop? And I said, yeah, no, I do have a laptop. So we Skyped to my laptop in Motel 6. We didn't have a movie to watch, so we talked about horror hosts. These monster movie hosts like Sven Gouley, who's one of our favorites, and Elvira, and the ones that we love, Zachary, and Miners Baron and Owen, and Dr. Enid Whitty, and all those guys. And we talked about the horror hosts we grew up with and stuff. Now, I'm in a Motel 6, the acoustics there are not very good. I didn't have any kind of mics or anything, so I'm just using the mic on the laptop. So I took all of the pillows that I could find in the motel room and got them all bunched around the laptop so that it wouldn't be too much of an echo. And it sort of worked. I mean, it's still, you can tell we weren't doing it, I wasn't doing it in the studio or in my home studio, but we didn't miss a show. I was able to edit it right there, on my laptop and shoot it up and just keep it going. So,
which is amazing. So, tell us exactly how many episodes of Monster Attack are there currently, if you know the total number.
Day after tomorrow, we will be publishing our 289th episode.
That is simply amazing. 6 years,
Yeah.
never missing a week. That is unheard of, in my opinion.
Yeah, a lot of people, when we first started Project I Radio, and we're solicited, when we signed a major horror writer to do a podcast, wanted to do a podcast, we met him at a convention, and I said, sure, yeah, come on in, and I think he's doing a weekly one. Still, although he has moved on to his own private, he started his own network down the road. He brought in a bunch of listeners for us, and some other horror authors who are still with us. Guys like Jonathan Mayberry and Jim Moore, and others that are some of the top horror writers in the country. So we became sort of a horror type podcast network, but we've now branched out into other venues, and just having a blast. Just having a blast. Well, the roundabout way we're getting to was that we had a lot of people approach us saying, come on, do a podcast, what do a podcast? We had some local Atlanta people who wanted to do one. So we had one guy who was a friend of ours who said, yeah, he says, I'm going to do it every week. And I said, are you sure? Yeah, by this time we'd already been doing it a couple of years. And we only did Nirvana and Bull's Half Hour for 2 years. And then I started with Monster Attack and Jess went on doing some other stuff. This guy lasted about 5 months, if that. So I mean, it's just, people don't understand what it takes to do a weekly podcast. Yeah. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, folks, but it's just like, it's not easy. There's a lot of podcasts, there's probably over 1 million podcasts right now out there. I would say a fourth of them won't be there next year. Oh, wow. But there'll be others that take its place, for people that don't know any better, and say, because it takes a lot to do them. If you're not just totally dedicated to the subject, or just, I'm totally in love with monster movies and I love talking about it, I just can't think of not doing it. But it still can be a pain in the rear end from time to time. If you're behind a little bit or whatever, it's like, I got a deadline here. So I've always worked in deadline businesses, so that helped a little bit to condition myself to say, you don't miss that deadline. I've had a couple of close calls where I was posting to the server the podcast that was going to have to be published like 2 hours later. So I think that's about as tight as I ever got on that.
So
it's a challenge.
What do you think is the most difficult thing about doing the podcast?
It doesn't always go well. I mean, it's like if you run into technical issues, or the hardest thing I think is scheduling. Because Mark was my permanent co-host for a while, and then his art commissions started picking up, and he's had to back off a little bit. So I don't mind going solo because it actually makes me a little more flexible, where I can record anytime and I can edit it a little faster. Sorry, I don't mean to slam Mark, but he does kind of have to be edited quite a bit. I'm just saying. No, because of technical reasons, just for technical reasons, but he does talk a lot. But I also have a little actress here in Atlanta, Natalie Brody, who's a former actress. Her boyfriend Shane Morton who's a big special effects guy, special effects makeup guy, stuff, works in a lot of cable shows and things. We're trying to get Shane to sit in with us permanently. He jumps in now and then when we're talking to Madeline. But and Madeline and I, we're sort of on the same page, so those shows, but they take a little more because with a two-man show and I'm never in the same room, I have to sync in the tracks together and stuff like that. It's not so bad now, but when I was on satellite internet, I really had to sync them in because there was a bad delay on the satellite. Now we're both on cable, which makes it a little easier. But it's that the production part of it. I think that's the part that people forget about. I want the show to sound good. Yeah. And I never want to be too polished that it turns people off, but you just can't get in front of the mic and scream the conscious for 40 minutes and make it sound good. And I think a lot of people think that they can do that. I've heard some really bad podcasts where it's clear that's going on. I won't mention the name of this one particular podcast because it's one that used to be with our network. They were supposed to discuss a point of view from two different points of view. One person had one side of the view, one person had the other, and they were debating.
Oh, yes.
And see who won for that week. The one time I tuned into the podcast recently, it was like, okay, what are we going to discuss today? I don't know. Gee, they didn't even have a subject pick for it, and that's how the podcast sort of went for about 15 minutes before I said, okay, I can't handle this. This is not fun listening to. So, and there's a lot of those out there that you just have to watch out for. It takes some talent to make sure you're telling a good story.
So, this brings up something that I want to ask you, what you do with your podcast.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have different views on this. When you say you edit your podcast, do you add in like special effects or?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes we do a variation of we now have subgenres within the podcast now. After a few years, we said, we want to have some fun with it, some more fun with this thing. So there are some bad movies out there that people love to watch. I used to pride myself and say, someone say, well, what's your hobby? Because I collect bad movies. And I still do. Because some of them they're so bad that they're good. They're fun. I'm a big Ed Wood fan. I won't necessarily say Ed films are bad, like they're not Academy Award winning either. But I just love watching these movies. But fun things like that. And I used to enjoy shows like Mystery Science Theater. But sometimes those guys can get mean. We didn't want to do that. We didn't want to go to that route, but we wanted to have fun. So it's more like a riff type deal. Yeah. What we call it's called rag-a-rom. So some episodes are rag-a-roms. And we don't do it every week. There's maybe once a month now. Because we started doing them here and there. And people say, why don't you do more rag-a-roms? We love those. So, we've got one coming up. I don't want to announce it because I'm going to keep it a surprise. I'm trying to make some of the ones we've done rag-a-rom on. It's funny because I'll do a show and then I'll forget about it. I'm really seriously.
Well, you got to think about the next show.
Yeah, and it's like I've been so deep into it. It's like, when we hit the stop record button for that week, it's like I can't really tell you what I might have said until I'm edited and listen to. Oh, did I say that? I don't remember. But it's loving fun. We really make fun of some of these. It's like, these are bad movies, but we do this with love. It's not to be hateful or mean, but just to rag. You want to rag a good friend or something like that. So I did a solo rag-a-rom on From Hell It Came. I was going to say To Hell Back, but that's a good war movie. From Hell It Came is an old classic 50s film about a tree monster. Yes, you heard me right. A tree monster. It takes place in Africa, which looks surprisingly like the forests of California. Or background of Columbia Studios, because it looks like something out of a bad Tarzan movie. Oh yes, I think they used some of that footage in the movie. Natives dancing around and stuff. And the Tobanga, which was this tree monster that looks surprisingly like Yosemite Sam, because the as a kid, I thought, that's Yosemite Sam. And bottles around, it's pretty ridiculous. But it was fun to make fun of, and of course they had the obligatory pool of quicksand that you had to have. In any movie that takes place in the jungle, in a monster movie or like a horror movie, you have to have a pool of quicksand. Because you don't have to be in the jungle, because there's pools of quicksand in House of Frankenstein, and others. I mean, you just have to have it, because it's like, how are we going to end this thing? Put them in the quicksand and kill it, okay? Boom. So that kind of stuff, that kind of rhythm, that's what we do.
Yeah, that was
So we have fun. It's like, I think even the people that were in those movies would get fun, have some fun.
Yeah, you just remind me that you're absolutely right. Like every in the 50s and 60s, that was the way they ended a lot of movies.
Quicksand.
And little bits showed up in random movies all the time.
And even made it into the 70s, because if you a movie that I love, a franchise that I love, the Count Yorga franchise. I love both of those movies. But even in Return of Count Yorga, you've got a scene where he is walking a minister in his garden, and he's setting him up, and all of a sudden the minister finds this pool of quicksand or something, because he's saying, he goes, I need help, and Yorga's like, yeah, whatever, and he's like, so even there, and that did take place in California, so you just never know where you're going to find this stuff.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It's like, I was a teenage Frankenstein, the Dr. Frankenstein just happened to have a pit of alligators, in this wonderful house in suburban California, but you can open up this little panel and there are the alligators down there that you can dump the bodies into. We know that every house in California comes with one of those, by the way.
In a sense, the filmmaking back in those days.
Oh, yeah.
One of the reasons why we enjoy them so much even today.
Absolutely.
You wouldn't be able to get that would not pass muster in our day and age, unfortunately. And that's probably why you focus on those type of films.
Yeah. Well, no, we had more fun back then. Yeah. We didn't take things so seriously. There was a time you had to have some fun. And this was mindless, some of it was mindless entertainment, but some of these monster movies are brilliantly done. I mean, you got stuff like The Thing, and Dan Here Stood Still, which is a classic science fiction, and still superior to any of the remakes. I mean, I like the Keanu Reeves one. It's okay, but it's not Michael Rennie's version at all. It's just so intelligently done. Just an incredible, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the original one, still holds up. So, they're not all mindless entertainment.
No. Well, so the reason why I want to also do this conversation is because I want other people to be watching this and learn something about some of the pitfalls of what they're going to experience when they do a podcast. What is some advice that you give people who are thinking about starting their own podcast?
Make sure you're recording it. That has happened on more than one occasion, where I would have a situation where somehow I wasn't recording, and we would get about 30 minutes into the podcast, and I look down and I go, oh my God. I go, Mark? And it was always with somebody. Never when I was doing it alone, which wouldn't have been so bad. I was like, we got to go back and do it again. I mean, it's like, and you just got to own up to it, because it's like, yeah, I just didn't get that. Something happened. I don't know how, but it just would happen. And, it's up to me. I'm responsible for the production, so it's up to me to make sure we are recording. We're on Zoom, and occasionally when they update Zoom, they throw away your preferences out.
Yes.
I always set my preferences when we automatically record the show, or record the call. I don't know it's a show. And always make sure that there's certain presets you can put in there about so-and-so for the guest and the host and all that. Yeah. And if I'm not careful, I have to check that every single time. Because sure enough, if I don't, something's going to be unchecked. That's how we went about one time last time. That happened to be we were recording, and I wasn't paying attention to the little screen. I was saying, recording, wasn't saying anything. I was like, uh-oh.
That just happened to me twice.
Yeah.
And man, did I really hate that day.
You just want to tear everything down. I tear up something.
Oh man, it's hard filming one show, like you said, trying to get an extra show in the bank.
Yeah,
It can make the day.
which will be around April, yeah. But the other thing is, there is some preparation involved. It's not scripted. We're not scripted. And I do that intentionally because I want to have a conversation with my co-host or whatever. I mean, I probably prepare, a little more closer to being scripted maybe when I do my solo shows. Although I just stream the conference. I may have a little outline saying I'm going to talk about this, and this. But watch the movie again, very close to doing the podcast, so it's fresh in your mind. One of my co-hosts had a bad habit of running the film in the background while he was doing the show. That does not work. That does not work. Some of these movies run an hour and a half. I'm doing 40 minutes. So if you're doing like play-by-play, that ain't gonna cut it. So I mean, you want to develop a sense of timing. When you get close to that 40-minute mark, you really want to gear towards wrapping up, even though there may be a ton of things you want to say. So you want to be careful not to ramble and go down the rabbit holes like I tend to do a lot if I'm not careful. But I mean, there are times I've had shows fill into an hour or whatever, but the flow went with it. I say, okay, if I'm listening to this, I will stay with it. But for the most part, people start turning it off after about 40 minutes. So be very true to that. And you say, well, I can't do it in 40 minutes. Well, then, don't do it. or take that same material and do it over 2 podcasts. But whatever. But I'm telling you, folks, people's attention span starts leaving after 40 minutes. And a lot of that is podcast listening usually involves some other activity. People do it driving to work, or a lot of my listeners live in areas where they have a long commute. So they'll listen to it that way, or working out, or that sort of thing. In about 40 minutes, you're pretty much done. So you better be done too. So don't think that you can, change the rules, because more likely you can't.
Yeah. Any final thoughts about podcasting, or any of the people watching for today?
I would, if you come up with an idea that you think is going to be a good concept, run it by a few people and pick people who are honest with you. People say, oh yeah, that's great, that's wonderful. Just they do that anyway. No, they be able to accept the honesty. I know the first time I ran the concept by Jazz, I didn't know how I was going to react. I feel like Boston was like I did too, but I said, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. But you have to be prepared for that. Because sometimes what seems good to you might not be that great. But I stuck to my vision as far as sharing the experience the movies created for me, not really the movies themselves. The movies are important, but each one had a different experience for me, and I tried to tap into how that movie made me feel, more than picking it apart. I talk about the way they're made and say, how the camera worked, which was great, all that, because of what they did, what it made me feel like. But I'm not like sitting out there as a critic saying, it was a fluid camera, no, I'm not that guy. That's not what we do. So check us out on Monster Attack and see what we're talking about.
So with that, this is Jim Adams, and we have been talking about podcasts, but most importantly, his podcast, Monster Attack, which we'll make sure or you can make sure to check it out wherever you can find podcasts.
We're being handled at virtually every venue that handles podcasts right now. I will brag on us a little bit. We're in the top 10% of all the podcasts that are out there in the country, according to a leading source that does that sort of thing, and rates it. We were very excited to find that out, and we were nominated for the first time this year for a Rondo Hatton Horror Award. We didn't win, but hey, it was our first time out. But and it wasn't that we nominated ourselves.
Yes.
This isn't one of these self things that because when someone wrote me, I actually got an email from a listener who said, "Congratulations, for what?" Because I had no idea. He said, "For the Rondos." And I went, "What are you talking about?" And then I forgot the Rondo nominations had come out that morning. I went, "Oh my God, somebody nominated us," and I had no idea. So, we're very proud of that.